The house is quiet. The kitchen light's still on. Your phone on the table. No message. You're not desperate. But something feels heavy. A thought whispers, what if it never happens? During the day you're strong. You make decisions. You solve problems. But night changes everything. Anxiety arrives slowly. Almost politely. It doesn't shout. It suggests. Maybe you waited too long. Maybe love already passed. Maybe this is your life now. And the silence agrees. But something about this voice is strange. It sounds logical. It sounds mature. Sounds real. But what if it isn't true? What if it isn't wisdom? What if it's just anxiety? Lying about your future? There is a reason nights feel heavier after 40. It isn't weakness. It isn't desperation. And it isn't emotional neediness. It's something quieter. Something psychological. Something deeper than it appears. And it begins long before the night arrives. During the day you function perfectly. You work. You solve problems. You make difficult decisions. You take care of your life. You maintain dignity. You maintain control. But night asks different questions. Because at night there are no distractions. No schedule. No noise loud enough. Only the mind wandering freely. And when the mind wanders freely, it finds an old question. A question you rarely say out loud. Will it still happen for me? And this is where something psychological begins. It isn't just loneliness. It's emotional tension. A very specific inner tension. You refuse just any relationship. But you also don't want a life without love. And the space between those two truths becomes a confusing territory in the mind. Relationship therapist Esther Perel explains something important about this. Emotionally mature women live a modern paradox. They have grown. They have learned. They no longer accept emotional crumbs. They no longer romanticize suffering. They no longer confuse attention with love. Yet the heart still longs for real connection. And this is exactly where anxiety finds room. Because the human mind hates uncertainty. It prefers any story. Even a painful one. Even a pessimistic one. Even an unfair one. As long as it sounds like an answer. Even if it is a lie. So anxiety begins to speak. But it doesn't sound like anxiety. It sounds logical. It sounds mature. It sounds realistic. It whispers things like, maybe it's too late. Maybe this is not in your path anymore. And you hear this more often than you realize. Especially when the silence stretches. Especially when you see other lives unfolding. Marriages. Relationships. Families being built. Slowly. A quiet doubt begins to form. The doubt does not scream. It does not create drama. It simply changes the way you look at the future. You imagine less. You expect less. You hope less. As if preparing for an absence. Even without knowing if it truly exists. And this is how anxiety begins to lie. Not with noise. But with quiet conclusions. Conclusions that sound mature. Conclusions that seem wise. Conclusions that feel productive. But underneath, they are just fear wearing the mask of wisdom. There is a detail about your story that almost no one notices. Not your friends. Not your family. And often not even you. Because it doesn't appear in photos. It doesn't show up in conversations. It doesn't appear on social media. But it shows up in every relationship you've had. You didn't start feeling this now. This pattern is old. Much older than it seems. Maybe it began when you still believed love was simple. When presence meant safety. When promises meant permanence. But some experiences changed that. And your heart learned quietly. Without noticing, you started observing more. Reading signals. Interpreting silence. Trying to predict abandonment. Measuring emotional intensity. Protecting your time. Protecting your dignity. Protecting your heart. And that is not wrong. In fact, it shows maturity. It shows emotional growth. It shows awareness. But there is a quiet side effect in all of this. When you learn too much from pain, sometimes you begin living in alert mode. Even when no one is attacking. Then something curious happens. You become more selective. More careful. More aware of what you accept. And that is healthy. But at the same time, your emotional radar begins detecting danger everywhere. Even where it doesn't exist yet. When that happens, two forces begin acting inside you. One part still wants something beautiful. It wants companionship. It wants real partnership. It wants to share life with someone. But another part watches everything quietly, as if constantly evaluating risk. That second part doesn't want suffering. It wants to avoid repeating old stories. It wants to prevent new wounds. It wants to avoid new goodbyes. So it creates a silent strategy. A strategy that looks like protection, but sometimes becomes distance. And this is where many emotionally mature women become trapped without noticing. They refuse superficial relationships, but they also struggle to fully lower their defenses. They want love, but they want safety first. They want surrender, but they want guarantees first. The problem is that real love rarely arrives with guarantees. It arrives with presence, with building, with gradual discovery. But when the mind tries to control risk, it also starts controlling emotional openness. Slowly, hope becomes more cautious. From the outside it just looks like loneliness. But inside something much more complex is happening. One part of you still deeply believes in love. Another part is tired of waiting. Another part is trying to protect what remains of your heart. And between these voices, anxiety finds space to speak. And that is where the mind begins creating dangerous conclusions. Not because you are weak, but because you are tired. Tired of interpreting signals. Tired of investing emotional energy. Tired of imagining futures that never arrived. And when exhaustion meets the silence of night, anxiety starts writing stories about your destiny. But the truth is, there is something here you haven't seen yet. This pattern did not start with time. It did not start at 40. It started the moment you decided to emotionally survive. Maybe that survival mechanism is now confusing protection with isolation. And when that confusion happens, anxiety begins to feel like truth. If these words are describing something you have never been able to explain, then this channel is for you. Here we talk about the silent truths of the heart, the ones almost no one understands after 40. Because sometimes you don't need more advice. You need clarity, peace, and direction for your soul. So click the button right now and subscribe to the channel. Maybe this is exactly the conversation your heart has been waiting to find. There is a silent price to living so long in emotional protection mode. You don't notice it at first, because it looks like strength, it looks like maturity, it looks like self-respect. But over time, that protection begins to charge something back. Something no one sees from the outside. The first cost is emotional exhaustion. Not physical tiredness, an inner fatigue, as if your heart is always on alert. Always reading signals, always measuring intentions, always preparing for possible disappointment, and that slowly drains the soul. The second cost is harder to notice. You start carrying everything alone. Decisions, responsibilities, plans, victories, even the small joys of daily life. As if sharing life stopped being a real possibility. Then something curious happens. You build a beautiful life, an organized life, stable life. But sometimes, especially at night, a specific silence appears. And that silence has weight. It's not only the absence of someone, it's the absence of a witness. Someone who sees your life up close. Someone who shares the small details. Someone who says, "I'm here." And when that presence is missing, the emptiness becomes clearer. At this point, many women begin doing something without realizing. They turn loneliness into identity. They begin saying things like, "This is just who I am. I got used to it. I prefer my peace." But sometimes that isn't peace. Sometimes it's adaptation to absence. And the longer this lasts, the more anxiety begins creating explanations. Maybe you are too difficult. Maybe your standards are too high. Maybe relationships just don't work for you. These thoughts sound like emotional protection, but often they are resignation in disguise. And this is where the false solution appears. Some people say, "Then love less." Others say, "Stop expecting." Others advise, "Close your heart." But none of these actually heal the problem, because love itself was never the enemy. Loving more doesn't solve it. Pleasing more doesn't solve it. Shutting down doesn't solve it either. Because the real problem was never your ability to love. The real problem was believing love had to cost your peace. And when you begin to understand this, something inside you starts shifting. Maybe the real mistake was never hoping for love. Maybe the mistake was trying to deserve it by carrying everything alone. Trying to be strong all the time. Trying to never need anyone. Trying to prove you can handle life alone. But the human heart was never designed for that. And deep down, you have always known it. Then a deeper question begins to rise. If loneliness is not your destiny, and anxiety is lying about the future, then what actually needs to change inside you? Maybe the answer is closer than you think, but to see it, you will need to look at yourself differently. And when that happens, the path to healing finally begins to appear. There is a moment when healing starts becoming possible. Not when someone appears, not when loneliness disappears, but when you begin looking at yourself with honesty, without blaming yourself, without pressuring yourself, without trying to fix everything at once, simply beginning to understand what truly needs to change. The first change is internal, and it is simpler than it seems. You need to stop treating your anxiety like an oracle. Anxiety does not predict the future. Anxiety tries to control the unknown. It takes old experiences, mixes them with fear, and calls it reality. So the first step is learning to question that voice. When the thought appears saying maybe it's too late, you pause, breathe slowly, and ask something simple. Is this a fact, or just fear speaking? That question changes your relationship with your own mind. Because not every thought deserves your trust. Psychology calls this cognitive distancing. The ability to observe thoughts without automatically obeying them. Instead of merging with anxiety, you begin to watch it, like watching a cloud pass by. It appears, it speaks, but it does not define your truth. The second change is even more important. You need to allow emotional hope again. Not naive hope, not fantasy-based hope, but mature hope. The kind that understands life can still surprise you, even after many disappointments. Because when the mind becomes used to protection, it begins avoiding expectation, avoids imagining the future, avoids desiring deeply, as if desire were dangerous, as if hoping were naive. But the human heart needs that openness. Hope is not a guarantee of outcome. Hope is an inner disposition. It is the quiet decision to stay open to life. Even when the mind wants to close doors. Even when the past tries to impose limits. Even when the clock feels like pressure. Hope is emotional courage. And something interesting happens with this courage. It changes how you move in the world. It changes the conversations you allow. It changes the environments you enter. It even changes how you show up in life. Because when the heart breathes again, emotional energy shifts. This is not about chasing love, nor about proving you deserve it. It is about living without the constant lens of fear. Allowing encounters to happen naturally. Not treating every connection as destiny. But also not closing the door before it even opens. This healing does not happen in a single day. It unfolds through small internal movements. Questioning one thought. Allowing a new conversation. Accepting an unexpected invitation. Imagining a possible future again. Small choices that reopen pathways inside the soul. And slowly something changes. The silence of the night feels less threatening. Anxiety loses some of its authority. The future stops feeling like a sentence. And you begin noticing something important. Maybe your story is not finished yet. Maybe life is still writing chapters. Chapters you haven't seen. And when that realization begins to jar, a new kind of hope appears. Calmer, quieter, stronger. Because now it no longer depends on urgency. It depends on trust. And trust changes everything. If you got distracted for a moment, come back here with me now. Because what comes next is the most important part of everything you've heard so far. This is where many women finally understand something that changes how they see their own story. So take a breath and listen carefully. There is something about anxiety that almost no one notices. It makes you believe everything depends on you. That if you don't control the future, things will go wrong. That if you don't understand everything now, something important will be lost. So your mind starts running, planning, analyzing, trying to predict every possibility. But there is a limit to that. Because human life has never been fully controllable. There are encounters you cannot manufacture. Moments you cannot accelerate. Paths that only reveal themselves with time. And when we try to control what belongs to time, the heart becomes exhausted. And anxiety grows. This is where spirituality offers a new lens. Not as an escape from reality, but as a different way of walking through it. Faith does not promise that everything will happen quickly, nor does it promise the absence of waiting. But it offers something anxiety can never give. Trust in the process of life. The Bible brings a fascinating promise about timing. A promise that directly confronts the fear of being too late. In the book of Isaiah, it says something simple yet powerful. When the time is right, I, the Lord, will make it happen. It does not say when you understand everything. It does not say when you control the future. Simply says, when the time is right. That changes how you see your story. Because maybe some things haven't happened yet. Not because you failed. Not because you missed your chance. But because certain encounters belong to a specific season of life. A season that does not answer to anxiety, but responds to purpose. Think about how many things in your life happened outside your plans. Unexpected changes. Doors that closed. Paths that suddenly appeared. If you look honestly, you will notice something interesting. Not everything that looked like delay was truly delay. Some losses were protection. Some detours were redirection. Some waiting seasons were emotional preparation. Because sometimes life needs to strengthen who you are becoming. Before bringing the person who will walk beside you. Before aligning two stories. And when you begin seeing this, anxiety loses part of its power. Because it only survives when you believe everything is late. When you believe you missed your moment. When you believe the future is closing. But maybe the story is different. Maybe your life is not late. Maybe it is being prepared. Prepared for a more conscious encounter. For a healthier relationship. For a love that does not require you to abandon yourself. And that kind of love rarely grows in haste. So maybe the question is no longer, will it still happen? Maybe the real question is this. Who am I becoming while life prepares the next chapter? Because when you begin trusting that process, something inside you finally rests. And it is in that rest that the soul breathes again. Not because every answer appeared, but because you now understand something important. The future does not belong to anxiety. The future, it belongs to time. Has not finished writing your story. Maybe now you begin to see your story with different eyes. Not as a sequence of delays. Not as a collection of failed attempts. But as a path of emotional maturity. A path few people truly walk. Because emotional growth requires courage. It requires awareness. And it requires learning from pain. You did not become this woman by accident. Every experience left something. Every goodbye taught something. Every silence revealed something. You learned self-respect. You learned to read signals. You learned not to accept less than you deserve. And that has immense value. But emotional maturity also brings a quiet challenge. Can make you believe you must carry everything alone. That depending on someone is weakness. That hoping for love is naive. That opening your heart again is too risky. So you become strong. But sometimes, too strong to rest. The truth is that life was never meant to be only strength. It was also meant to be encounter. Partnership. Walking side by side. Sharing silence. Sharing burdens and also joy. Because healthy love does not ask you to abandon yourself. It only asks you to remain whole. Maybe the real new beginning is not meeting someone immediately. Maybe the beginning is something deeper. It is recovering peace inside your own heart. It is realizing your story is not late. It is accepting that life unfolds in different rhythms. It is staying open to life, without letting anxiety write the ending. Because anxiety always tries to do that. Tries to write endings too soon. It tries to convince you the future is already decided. But life rarely works that way. Life keeps moving, keeps surprising, keeps creating encounters no one could predict. Maybe the love you imagined at 20 will not be the love that comes now. Maybe it will be calmer, more conscious, deeper. A love that does not come from need, but from choice, from maturity, from emotional freedom. And that changes everything. Because when two people meet in that place, they are not trying to save each other. They are not trying to fill impossible emptiness. They simply walk together. Share life. Share growth. Share presence. But before any encounter happens, there is something even more important. You must make peace with your own story. Stop fighting time. Stop fighting the past. Stop fighting questions that still have no answers. Just keep walking. With dignity. With hope. Because your life is not a mistake waiting to be fixed. It is a story being written. A story still breathing. A story that still has blank pages. Maybe many more pages than anxiety wants you to believe. So when night comes again, and that voice whispers it is too late, remember something simple. That voice does not know the future. It only knows And fear has never been a good writer of destinies. The future is still open. Time is still moving. And your story is not finished yet. If this message resonated with you, subscribe to our channel right now. Here we talk about the silent truths many women experience after 40, the ones almost no one explains honestly. This is a space to recover clarity, emotional peace, and trust in your own path. Maybe this channel is exactly where your mind finds answers, and your heart finds rest. Stay with us on this journey, and if you made it to the end of this video, write the word hope in the comments. This simple act is a way of declaring that your story is still moving forward. Many people here are walking the same silent journey as you, and those who comment open space for God to strengthen their faith and renew their inner peace. Today might be the first day of a new chapter.